to 10 seconds reading a resume. So if you can't make your impression in 8 to 10 seconds, definitely the second page is worthless. I can't get to the second page in 8 to 10 seconds. And honestly, most professionals aren't getting past the first half of the page. So you really have to make an impression on paper very quickly. But the good news in veterinary medicine, and why I don't focus or harp so much on the resume, the whole point of a resume is to get an interview. Selling yourself in person is where you get the job and how you differentiate yourself from your peers. But again, on the business side, you have to be able to just get your foot in the door to make that impression. Fortunately, in our profession, it's much more, all you really need to do is submit your resume, show that you're interested, again, do the very basic things of sending emails and phone calls or responding in a timely manner, and you'll get the opportunity to make that connection and make that case for why you're the best person.
Cool. Well, that was very helpful.
Yeah.
Hopefully I will never have to do my resume again, but
it's unlikely. Yeah.
But I always, in my mind, it was like, oh, but look how much I've done. But I mean, yeah, in 8 to 10 seconds, no one would get past the first page.
Right. It's daunting. There's no question. Yeah. It's daunting. Yeah.
You just spell out "pick me," like with every line that you write. Maybe subliminally you would get. So having done a fair number of interviews in the last couple of years as the medical director at Independent Hill, because it's taken us a while to find the right fit for our veterinarians. Right. Personally, when I agree, like I've had some people come in to do we call them working interviews, but they don't really see appointments. They just, It's kind of like being a fourth year all over again. And they're on their phone, or like I had one person log into Facebook on my computer and I didn't realize it. And then I went in to log in for Independent Hill like a month later and it was still logged in as them on their Facebook.
Right.
Like that doesn't bode well.
Yeah, it's a whole other set of problems. Yeah.
Yeah. I was very nice though. I didn't do anything. Right. I just logged them out, but I could. But I agree. I think being engaged and asking questions about the practice, and even if you don't want the job, like, it's always nice for people to want you more than you want them. So acting like you're interested.
Yes.
But are there any, so when you're in that interview process, right, and you're following the veterinarian along, you're observing the day, are there certain questions from the interviewer or interviewee that you think they should really focus on, aside from salary? And because to be honest, if when people interviewed at Independent Hill and they would ask about salary, that's something more that the operations manager would usually discuss. So for me, like anything about benefits, that's great. You should know about them, but I don't deal with that. Yeah. So when you're talking to specifically a medical director, what should you be asking to really make sure this is a practice for you?
Yeah, I mean, the questions that if I was interviewing for a position, especially a practicing position, that I would want to ask, again, especially the people on the floor of the practice, is, what is it like to practice here day in and day out? How busy are you on a regular basis? What is the culture like? And, and not just asking the veterinarian you're spending time with, but, go spend time with the receptionist, go spend time with, the lead technician, the kennel people, how happy are they working there? And even although in some cases, if people are unhappy, they will just say it and they'll say they hate their job. That's probably unlikely, but sometimes it'll happen. Most of the time, the way they answer those questions, you'll pick up on if they're genuinely enjoying their job, if it's a genuinely good place to work. Are the clientele enjoyable to work for? Because that's what we're doing. We're working for the clients to service the patients. Those are the questions I would want to ask. And then specifically for the medical director and the operations team, if they're there, how is the practice doing financially? Is the practice growing? Are you hiring me to grow the practice? What is my schedule going to look like? What do you expect from me? From a volume perspective, a procedure perspective. If you feel so bold and are comfortable, can we look at the financials together over the past, couple of years? Are my veterinarians, are you hitting production goals? Are you not hitting production goals? Really spend time talking about not only the culture, but the business as well, because either what you'll find is you'll talk to a company or a practice, I should say, that really understands what they're hiring for. They know the business. They're not afraid to share how things are going, whether good or bad. Or you'll get into a situation where people don't know, we don't know how the business is doing. We're not sure. We're unsure really if what we're going to do with another vet, or they'll stonewall. And in those cases, I would be a little bit more nervous about what the situation potentially could be, unless again there's a pretty clear communication of this is a turnaround project. We've certainly had a couple of those where we've talked with the veterinarian and been very open about, look, this hospital is struggling, it's going to take a lot of work, the numbers are very definitely down, but that's one of the reasons we want you to come in, and of course we're going to compensate you accordingly for that, because that would certainly, on my end, if I was again interviewing, that would, I think, adjust my salary and compensation expectations. So focus on those questions. And, if you can, which, who has time when you're not only in fourth year, but, working for a living, if you can spend multiple days, do that, because, and that's when I talk with fourth years, use your externships for that reason. Everyone can hide the crazy, if you will, for a day or two, but for a week, it's really hard to hide it. It's going to come out. You're going to see it eventually, or it's not there, right? So it's just, and then it's a really good opportunity. But of course, once you're out and working, you really can't spend a week doing that, unless you're relief veterinarian and you're in between kind of what your next steps are. So.
Awesome. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you about is you helped start the mentorship program for Petwell. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the mentorship program, the major concept is to provide our first year veterinarians. The goal with the mentorship program is to provide very regimented guidance for their first year. And the way we really focused on doing that initially was through regularly scheduled evaluations, and evaluations not only for our first year associates, but also for us. How are we doing? Ensuring that there's time every day or every week with their mentor to walk through cases that have been difficult, ensuring that with but rare exception, they aren't practicing by themselves for the first 6 months or so, really starting at their pace in terms of how much they want to see clients, and then accelerating that to where, where most of our veterinarians fall, every 20 to 30 minute appointments. And I would say that's what our program has been for the past 2.5, 3 years. I would say it's had some success, and I would say we've definitely had some failures, and largely failures that have been on our side. And one of the things we, I think, really did well last year and take a proactive step was not only hire a chief medical officer, but also hire 2 what we call clinical directors. So veterinarians with a lot of practice experience and also a lot of business experience to work with our chief medical officer and ensuring that when we hire you as a first year, you get all those things that we just talked about. And one of the other programs that I'm honestly the most excited about that I worked with our chief medical officer on creating, so we call our advanced mentorship program, because one of the ways in which we just continually struggle on our mentorship guidelines is getting those veterinarians who want it advanced surgical skills. So, the ability to do a splenectomy, or to fix a foreign body, or a cystotomy, et cetera. It's so hit or miss in general practice. And even then, kind of like you mentioned, even if those cases come in, we may have some veterinarians who are just uncomfortable doing it, and certainly uncomfortable teaching it to a young veterinarian. So one of the things we did, one of the things we created once we acquired our first emergency hospital last year in Houston was this advanced mentorship program, which I liken to a condensed internship. So 4 to 5 months where you rotate through a wellness practice. So you get really comfortable doing the very basics, talking to clients, doing wellness, vaccines, heartworm prevention, flea tick prevention, spays and neuters at a progressing and quicker rate. Then you spend a month doing general practice, so getting used to some of the basic non-well cases that you'll see. And then you spend 2 to 3 months in our emergency hospital. Because in our emergency hospital, if you were there long enough, you should see the advanced surgical cases You'll certainly see, I think, some of the more advanced medical emergency cases. And most importantly, you will get that experience of talking to clients about major financial decisions. I think it's one thing to convince clients and talk with them about spending $300 for, a basic, GI workup plus treatment. It's a whole nother conversation to have them spend $3,000, especially when the outcome is not always going to be, is not always known, right? So the goal was to condense, and I think that's where the internship comes into play, right? I think that's where veterinarians who do an internship, whether they specialize or not, you're going to get those experiences whether you want to or not. That's part of the internship bargain, if you will. And so I think that's really where we can add value as a company. And I think that's where other hospitals can add value as well. It's not mandatory. It's one of the things we're offering. And I think the thing that we wanted to ensure as well is we're going to pay those veterinarians a normal salary and we're going to work them normal hours. Because that's one of the things I think that turns off, and rightly so, a lot of veterinarians from doing an internship is the extremely long hours for the extremely low pay. And I think that's something we need to steer away from as a profession, given the amount of student loan debt that our young veterinarians are acquiring. And again, given the very many opportunities that are out there that could be maybe not as beneficial as a good internship, but close. So that's what we have right now. Again, I'm really excited to see how we do this year with the handful of young veterinarians we hire. And it's just, I think, that's, for veterinarians out there listening who have their own practice, who are looking to hire young vets, if you can make that commitment to the younger veterinarian that, like, look, I'm going to mentor you for at least 6 months. I'm going to be there with you every day. We're going to spend time outside the practice where I'm going to show you how to do these extra skills. You will have every advantage over anybody else who's hiring, because that's what so many young veterinarians want more than anything else. Money, time, they want to be mentored appropriately.
But thank you so much for interviewing with me, and I really appreciate you taking time.
Yeah, especially, if you need anything else, let me know.
Yeah, well, I think my guess is we'll get really good response to, especially like the tips for interviews and the resumes, and as well as I bet people have more questions about the internship. And
sure,
were you involved in the loan repayment program? Yep. Do you? I feel like I keep holding you hostage, but if you want to mention that, we can include that.
Yeah. So we and I think this is a good thing that there are other companies doing this along with us. But the way our program works, so we certainly recognize that the student loan debt problem in our profession is reaching very critical stages, and we want to do something to help with that. And instead of and try and do it in a financially responsible way for us as well as the students, as well as the young veterinarians, I should say. And so what we came up with was a really just a bonus that we give our young veterinarians based on either the amount of time they stay with us or the amount of money they produce for us. It's tiered. So the first tier, if you will, is either your first $500,000 in production or your first 2 years of service. And at that point, what we do is we pay a $5,000 bonus that we pay out monthly over the course of 3 years. So it's money directly that you can put towards your student loans. It's money you can do with really whatever you want, for sure, but it's money that you'll get closer and almost shortly after graduating, again, that will help just start hopefully taking a little bit more of a dent in your student loans. And I know there are other programs out there. I know Banfield has one. I know there are other groups like ours that are looking into them, and I think they're all good things. And again, it is a way in which we can help. We can incentivize our veterinarians to stay with us, as long as we're providing them with a good, comfortable work environment, and then reward them by helping them take hopefully a little bit more of a chunk out of this massive financial burden they've saddled themselves with.
That's awesome. Do you do it for veterinarians that have been out for 12 years?
Unfortunately, no. We have to set some limits on our program, sadly.
That's all right. Next time.
Yes. Well, hopefully not. There isn't next time.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Well, Okay, for real. Thank you.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Yeah, that was awesome. And I will probably hit you up again if for no other reason than you have such an interesting background.
And there you have it. All sorts of helpful tips for new grads and experienced veterinarians alike. A lot of this information would have been really helpful, I think, when I was first looking for a position. But to be honest, they may have actually had something like this in vet school.